Gentlemen, namaskar and welcome to the 15th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India. We'd like to welcome our online and offline audience. Both the festival brochure and flyer are available for purchase at the information desk, and we urge you to check for any information or schedule changes. We are delighted to introduce our next session, The Child Within. This session has been presented by the Embassy of Iceland. Writing for young readers requires a leap of perception and emotional intelligence. Author and illustrator Kristín Ragna Gunnarsdóttir is deeply invested in communicating with the unfettered landscape of the young mind through all aspects of the narrative, including design and illustration. She has illustrated several children's books and has been recognized for her immense contribution to children's culture, transporting young minds across vivid, vast, and varied subjects. In conversation with Shivani Sibal, Gunnarsdóttir discusses the creative process and reaching for the child within. Kristín Ragna Gunnarsdóttir from Reykjavík, Iceland, is the author and illustrator of 14 children's books that have been nominated for various prizes, including the Icelandic Literature Prize, the Nordic Council Literature Prize, the Icelandic Women's Literature Prize, and the West Nordic Council's Literature Prize. Our moderator today, Shivani Sibal, is a Delhi-based author whose debut novel, Equations, was launched in July 2021. Set in New Delhi from the 1980s to modern times, the novel traces the story of social change, ambition, and familial bonds. And the novel has received rave reviews in several reputed publications. Ladies and gentlemen, The Child Within. Kristín Ragna Gunnarsdóttir in conversation with Shivani Sibal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's a really big honor to be here.
I think, of course, it's a big honor to be here, but as all of us know, it's a big honor to literally be anywhere now, right? I mean, after the pandemic, we're just so thrilled to be out and here together. But yes, it's lovely to be here with you. Why don't we start with you introducing us to the wonderful world you've created?
Thank you. I'm going to see whether I can put something on here.
Ah, there you go.
I have quite a few pictures here with me. So I'm a writer and illustrator from Reykjavík in Iceland. And I'm also a curator of, yeah. This is not running on itself. Okay, thank you very much. So I don't have to worry about that. Thank you very much. So I'm a writer and illustrator, and I've been focusing on children's culture for quite a while. I've been curating exhibitions and running workshops for children, and as well as focusing on children's culture, I'm also focusing on the literature heritage of Iceland and the Nordic countries, and trying to present it in an exciting modern way and getting people involved in this heritage and keeping it alive, really. So you can see through the illustrations that will be running here throughout our conversation that I'm trying to put my own mark on our heritage, but also make it interesting so that children become curious and start diving into this area themselves. And there you can see some of the picture books that I have made from our old literature, the Eddic poetry, and the stories from the prose Edda. And has anyone here ever heard of the Icelandic sagas? Yes. Well, I encourage you to look them up. They are really, really exciting. And there you could see a tapestry that I made from a saga called Nyol's Saga, which is one of the most famous Icelandic sagas. And so this is kind of the area that I've been working within, and I know that you have some questions in regards to it.
You know, this is really vivid and evocative work. And we were discussing as we were waiting that as a child, you would draw in all your notebooks. And you if you didn't find any illustration, you used to illustrate it yourself.
Yeah.
Where do you get inspiration from?
Well, first of all, of course, from children's literature. I read a lot as a child, and I loved the literature that I read. I loved Alice in Wonderland, and I loved The Hobbit, and The Wizard of Oz, and Astrid Lindgren's books, House Andersen's adventures, and of course, the mythology and folk tales that I got to know as a child. Mythology and folk tales from all around. But when I got to know the Nordic histories very well, because I have been diving into it for quite a while, I really felt that I needed to express them to children in a way so that they would find out how exciting they are. Because we have authors like Tolkien, who of course used our old mythology and the Eddic poetry as inspiration for The Hobbit, and all the names of the dwarves in The Hobbit are from a poem called Völuspá, which is the Sibyl's prophecy. And this poem has really been my core inspiration. I have been working with this poem in many various ways, and I have both made picture books. There you can see the cover of the book, Völuspá, that I made with the author Þórarinn Eldjárn, who is a master in making the old fresh and new. And there is this Sibyl who is saying of how the world came to be, how the world of the Nordic gods is composed, and how everything starts out very well. They start building the world, giving things names, creating new beings and so on. But then they become greedy and they break vows and things turn to the worse. And we have this circle where it ends in the apocalypse called Ragnarök. But fortunately, things do go in a circle, so everything goes up again. And this tends to be something that we human beings do. We take things around in a circle. So this has been kind of my core inspiration.
You know, like you said, when you were a child, you read a lot. Even when I was a child, I think I'm the last generation that grew up without the internet, and that is my privilege and good fortune. Today, there is so much competing for children's attention that I would imagine, and I would say this as a mother of young children myself, that children have so many specialized toys, and this is going to make your child smarter, and this is going to make their motor development better. As a result, I think the imagination has taken a beating, and they're just not familiar with these things anymore.
Yes,
the act of reading, the pleasure of it.
I can agree with that. We should encourage children to be creative. We should encourage children to be think for themselves and so on. And so we should maybe have more toys that are, creative in that manner. And I have been running workshops that have this goal, really, to have children become creative and look around and see what kind of material do you have that you can make something from. And because we have these environmental issues also, we have to be creative in using stuff that is there and not just buying new stuff. So this has really been something. When I was a child, I didn't have a lot of toys, so I made my own. And this is something that I encourage children to do also in storytelling, because storytelling is really, really important in helping children find their own voice and helping children mirror themselves in the stories. So I say, and what I would recommend is, instead of having lots and lots of toys, of course they are fun, I love toys, but have books all around. Literature opens gates, books build bridges, and they get children to think for themselves and open new gates instead of closing them.
Yes, even the way that children record memories, it must have changed, because at least when I used to go to my children's school functions and things, they view themselves as a performer as well as the video which their parents created later. And I would say that this has altered the way that memories are formed, that the way our mind thinks. And while I agree with you that we should tell our children to do this, I can say that wary pandemic parents will say, just do whatever it takes, right? And yes, the pandemic has narrowed the world of children in a way which I feel is unprecedented. And what do you think about art, books? in opening that up again?
Yes, well, I think that art plays a really important part in this, because in the pandemic, things are have been sealed off, closed off. And recently I traveled around Iceland meeting children at schools. And there was one thing that they all had in common, and that was the joy of being able to come together again, sit in a room like this here and enjoy a story together. And we were making stories together and their eyes were sparkling. So I think that art is the way out of isolation, and I promote creativity in every aspect, also in regards to critical thinking.
So of the dragons and monsters that leap out of your stories, which is your favorite? Like, tell us a little more about them.
Well, in the poem Völuspá, the Sibyl's Prophecy, there are quite a few monsters. And when I got to know it for the first time, I was quite sure, I mean, kids will love this. There's a dragon.
Sorry, just come a little closer to you.
Yeah, there's a dragon there called Nýðhöggur, and he gnaws at the root of the world tree. And then there's a worm called the Miðgarðs serpent, who swims around the world and can bite its tail. And there's this huge, huge wolf called the Fenris wolf. And he just keeps on growing, and he is my favorite. I started out by illustrating him in various picture books and exhibitions and so on. I had him made in a huge scale so that children could climb on his back, could open his mouth to see inside it and so on. But then when I started writing children's books, where I have children from our world go into the world of the Nordic gods, and they get to know the gods, the goddesses, and the creatures. And the Fenris wolf in the first book in a book series called Wolf and Edda, he gets to tell his story. And his story is, of course, completely different than that of the god that the gods say of the wolf. So I'm trying to give a voice to the animals, the creatures, and also I'm putting the women in the Nordic mythology forefront. So they are upstage. And then, of course, we have the problems of everyday children, and they have problems in regards to their families, their friends, their problems with identity and change in the environment and so on. And I'm mirroring these things with the world of the gods, and we have very similar problems. So the Fenris wolf, he plays a big part in this.
Wow. You just spoke of identity, and this makes me think, we're from such different cultures, but do all children want the same things? Do they find the same things interesting, exciting? So in your work, what have you seen? How does culture affect creativity?
Well, I've traveled quite a bit and had workshops in different countries with children. And children everywhere are so creative, and they have so many stories to tell. There's a little difference in how articulate they are when you ask them questions, but in other aspects, they are just the same everywhere. But the issue of identity is very big with children. Who are they, and how can they feel that they are part of a community, but also the identity of each and every one, that each individual matters. And this is an issue that I have been writing about in my book series about Wolf and Edda, where the children are really trying to get a grasp of who they are. And then also I have wrote a book series called Witch's Tale. And there I have these witches from the world of Norse mythology that come to Iceland and, of course, turn everything upside down. And there the children are also grasping with, trying to find out who they are, what are their strengths, and also how much friendship matters. And I'm hoping to empower children. That's really what I would like to do.
You just spoke of Norse mythology. Tell us about the little people. I don't know very much about it, but I think everybody would love to know about this.
Well, in the Norse mythology, we have the dwarves, and then we have giants. So we have giants that really are the aspect of the volcanoes and the glaciers and the expressive nature that we have in Iceland and in the Nordic countries. And then there are the dwarves that are kind of the gods make them out of the soil, and they are really creative. and they're artists. So they make magical items out of gold and so on. So all the magical items of the gods and goddesses are made of these dwarfs. So that's
really interesting that they're all from nature.
Yes, they are part, the creatures are made out of nature, really, yes.
I was just thinking what we're talking about, and for a child, the balance between illustration and text must be a fine one, because I would imagine that your audience, well, can't always read, right? So you have to to reach out to the mind of a child.
Yeah.
When we're all getting further away from it every day,
Yes.
like tell me about the balance of text and
images are very important today in the child's lives. You know that there are images everywhere. It's really important also that children gain the literacy of images, but I'm trying to work with images and text together using the strength of both. And as you said before, children have so many things going on now, we have to catch their attention. And illustration is really the way to catch a child's attention in regards to books. You kind of lure them in and get them to read. And getting a child to read, I mean, these are the future readers. If you can't get a child to read now, they will not read later for their own pleasure. And illustrations and the balance between illustrations and text is really, it's such a, you're tackling these two mediums, and you're using the pictures to depict feelings, kind of like music. You're using colors that talk to the heart, and then you're using the text to give the characters voices so that they get to speak up. You're also moving the storyline forward with the text, but then you're drawing attention to certain parts of the story with vigorous images. So you're choosing which part of the story are you going to elevate and so on with the illustration. So I really love the dynamic play between illustration and text.
And what do you hope to spark in a child through your work? Is it always the same basic emotion or is it something different every time? Because do you set out with an idea that this is what a child should get from this, or do you kind of go with the illustration and see where it goes?
Well, I try to have fun.
What is your process?
Yeah. I try to have fun myself. I believe that if I really have fun and if I feel passionate for my characters and for what they're going through and so on, the reader will also become passionate about it and will step into their shoes and so on. So first and foremost, I try to have fun, but then of course I'm saying something. I feel that I have something to say, and I have my characters do it really. So the characters have maybe kind of these different messages, because I'm not going to be preaching to children. I want them to have fun reading and fun looking at the illustrations, but then I want them to read between the lines. And empathy is really something that I find is very, very important, and being open-minded and accepting other people for what they are and for where they come from. This is something that I find is really, really important. And also a girl power is something that I have been promoting. And then it is this point with the literature heritage and keeping the heritage alive, but also to get children to be passionate about reading. Because I think that if you find this one book that ignites your love for books when you're a child, you are hooked. So that's, I dream of writing that book that some child would ignite this passion for literature. That would be my dream.
What I'm taking away from what you just said is that you want the child almost like a Rorschach test to take what they want from it, to develop their own creativity. And this is actually very different from a kind of moral stories that we had to read when we were kids in India. They literally hammered the point home that you must be like this. And I think it impacts me even today. There is a level of self-censorship in me because we were told that this is how you should be. But it's interesting that that's something you don't kind of get into.
No, I think that writing for children, you really have to step down. You have to be at their level. You have to see the world with their eyes and experience it from their eyes. What is it that grabs their attention? Where are their anxieties? Where is their passion? Where is their curiosity and wonder? And we should not write down to children, not from above. And I really feel strongly about this.
Well, I think you should read from some of your work to us, because I think we're discussing this intellectually. I think we'll all benefit from a reading.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a short excerpt from a book called Wolf and Edda and the Stolen Relic. And in front here, you can see a golden relic. And this girl, Edda, her grandmother found this relic in a historical place in Iceland called Skálholt. And at the same time, there was this really curious guy there looking for the same item. And he turns out to be Loki, which is a famous trickster in the world of Norse mythology. But he has posed in the chapter that I'm going to read for you. His name is Guðbrandur, not very easy for you, but his real name is Loki, and he has stolen this relic. And Wolf and Edda, they are step siblings. They don't get along. And they follow the thief down into a system of tunnels that run underneath Skálholt. And Skálholt in the olden days was a place, a kind of a university and a worldly place, but also yes, it's quite a historical site in Iceland. And I'm going to read to you from a chapter where they are following the thief to get this relic back. And the translation that I'm reading is by Larissa Kaiser. The chapter is called Vampires. The vaulted ceiling of the cave was pretty high up. Spiky rocks protruded from the cave mouth like the teeth of a savage beast. Maybe this is Surthellir, said Wolf, a lava cave that was named after Surtur, the fire giant who set the world on fire with his flaming sword. He's definitely related to the Balrog in Lord of the Rings. That's the thing that dragged Gandalf into the depths of Moria. Wolf clambered over loose rocks towards the edge of the cave. Don't go so close, shouted Edda, trying to grab him. I'm not a chicken like you, said Wolf, settling on top of a large boulder on the ledge. Whoa, it's a long way down. He took a stone and threw it through the spluttering torrent. Look, there are steps. Edda braced herself against the wall of the cave and edged closer to the opening. Spray from the waterfall tickled her cheeks, and there were butterflies in her stomach. Her knees had started to shake. Steep stairs were cut into the black cliff beyond the waterfall. The steps ran all the way down to a grassy bank below where there was a large pool. The waterfall crashed down there, creating a bubbling whirlpool in the water. Let's turn around, said Edda. Guðbrandur, you remember the guy, that's Loki, didn't come this way. She cocked an eye in the direction of the tunnel, but then noticed a shapeless mass. What's that? Wolf scrambled over the uneven cave floor and poked at the mass with one of his feet. Nothing happened. Then he rifled through it and stood up quickly. Whoa! A white shirt floated through the air like a ghost. Edda jumped so high she almost fell backwards. Wolf let the shirt fall and tossed a familiar pair of trousers into the air. Then he threw himself onto a pillow that was lying among the clothes. Guðbrandur was here, said Edda. That's his suit. He must have needed to take a nap, said Wolf. But where did he go in his underpants? It's not like he turned into a fish or a bird, said Edda. Or a bat, said Wolf. What was that? What? Don't you hear that sound? No, I just hear the rush of the waterfall. You've started imagining things again. It was flapping wings, said Wolf. Haven't you heard stories about bats? They're bloodsuckers that transform into... You can't believe everything you hear, said Edda. Most kinds of bats just live on insects. And anyway, there aren't any bats in Iceland. Come on, let's find Guðbrandur before he vanishes into thin air. Chiabby-dabby, Mr. Tubby, sang Wolf, putting a shirt on that was way too big. over his Spider-Man outfit. Then he fished a striped tie out of the pile of clothes. "Quit messing around and let's hurry up," said Edda, but her knees went out from under her. The steps were steep and the waterfall thundered below, so she couldn't look all the way down, could only stare stiffly down at the first step. It was slippery from the spray of the waterfall, and she gripped the cliff ledge so that she wouldn't lose her balance. Her grandmother's words echoed in her head: "No risk, no reward." Maybe this was just such a moment. Suddenly they heard a whirring noise coming out of the tunnel. Edda looked behind her. Tittering black-brown bats were zooming out of the cave. Wolf had a petrified look on his face. "Vampires!" he shrieked. He lost his balance and fell backwards, the white shirt puffing out like wings. One of Edda's feet slipped off the step, but she grabbed onto a vine and regained her footing. Wolf plummeted through the surface of the pool below, water gushing in all directions, and he vanished in the whirlpool. Edda didn't hesitate now, rather jumped down the slippery steps as fast as she could and into the grassy hollow, sliding all the way to the edge of the water as if she were on skis. "Wolf, where are you?" shouted Edda. The top of Wolf's head popped out of the water, but then disappeared once again. Edda flung off her backpack, ripped off her scarf, and threw one end of it into the churning water. Wolf appeared again, but he'd been pulled closer to the vortex. The whirlpool was sucking him down until suddenly Edda felt something on the line. She clutched the scarf, dug in her heels, and started dragging Wolf to shore. The scarf stretched tight, but Wolf hung on for dear life. Finally, Wolf reached dry land. Edda pulled him far up out of the water and turned him onto his back. He lay there, prostrate on the bank. His eyes were clenched tight and his cheeks were puffed out like a frog's. "Wolf, Wolf, are you okay? Are you okay? Wake up!" Edda put her hands together in a cross like she'd seen in a first aid book and pressed hard on his chest. All of a sudden, his eyes opened and he spewed a jet of water right into Edda's face. She threw herself backwards into the grass as Wolf rolled over on the bank, writhing with laughter. "Wow, that was fun," he said, gasping for breath. "Are you crazy? You nearly drowned." "I wasn't drowning. I was just practicing my underwater swimming," said Wolf. He stood up and shook himself like a dog. Edda simmered with anger as she pulled away. Next time, he could save himself. That was for sure. And it just so happens that he, of course, has to save himself when he falls off a cliff and lands in front of a cave where the Fenris wolf that I mentioned before lies waiting.
This seems to have all the action a child would want.
I hope so.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Before I, thank you for sharing that. Before I open up for questions, I had a last question for you, which is, when I was looking at your presentation, could you tell us a little more about the Nyol Saga tapestry? I feel like that's something that hasn't come up.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would love to. This is an amazing project that has been going on in Iceland since 2011. I was fortunate enough to be asked to illustrate this most famous of the Icelandic sagas on a tapestry. And it's 90 meters long. And if you have heard of the Bayeux tapestry, this is the same kind of tapestry sewn with the same stitch. And this was a community project because I spent 2 years speaking to the characters of this story. And these are really dynamic characters, a great, great story. I encourage you to read it. And talking to them and drawing them. And when I had finished, people could come to this place at Hvolsvöllur, which is just by Eyjafjallajökull. If you've heard about that glacier volcano that erupted a few years ago. And
Yes.
so people could come there and sew. So hundreds of people came there and were stitching and sewing the story of Nyol Saga. And there they were, of course, having this discussion about the literature, about the story, about the characters and so on. And people just sat there for hours sewing, and it was really, really amazing. And now it took 7 years to sew 90 meters. And it is finished now, and they're building a museum for it in the south of Iceland. So when you all come to Iceland, I encourage you to come and see the Nyol Saga tapestry.
Sorry, did I understand correctly that hundreds of people were just showing up and sewing?
Yes, people, tourists, anybody that was in the area could come and sew. And there was also this really tight community of people from Hvolsvöllur that came there every week and sat there together telling stories and sewing. Really
That's
passionately.
absolutely amazing.
Yes.
And was there a master plan, or you just came and sewed some part of it and left? And
well, they had maybe 5 meters out of the story at a time, so you had to kind of sew somewhere in that. But then everybody wrote down their name and they wrote what figure it is that they are illustrating, so that they have an idea of what character it is, and they can look that character up in the story. But this is a really a community project and a good example of how literature can bring people together and how really good stories really can live and survive.
I mean, it's really about leaving a part of yourself somewhere, isn't it?
Yes,
it's saying, I was here.
Yes.
Isn't that?
That is part of it also.
I think I'm going to drop a note in the JLF suggestion box that they should have something like this next year.
Yes.
Some kind of community art project, which, there's so many people who come here just to enjoy the festival, and if they could leave something behind. But I think this is possibly not the forum for that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. Yeah, please. Is there anyone with a mic for the questions? Yeah.
Ma'am, thank you so much for this talk. It was really inspiring for my child within. But as a designer in profession, I'm very critical because my job requires it. But sometimes when I want to illustrate, like I've started recently, I'm very, very critical of my own work. I sometimes don't like that, I don't like this, and I end up not actually ever completing what I've started. So how do you deal with that?
I also teach illustration and creative writing, and there is this point in the idea making and so on where it is really important to take this critic that is bugging you and just leave him outside, just kind of lock him out of the room and have fun drawing and getting a sense of what you're doing. It's in later stages of the work where it is good to then open the door and have that critic come back inside, but he is really your worst enemy when you're doing creative work. So what I would say is try to get into the flow of creation, really, really immersed in your work so that you forget it, and do it by having fun doing what you're doing, because I know what you're talking about. All right, please.
Good morning, Kristín, and hi, Shivani, once again.
Good to see you again.
Same here. Okay, so Kristín, my name is Amrita, and I run a library, and my whole focus is to kindle back reading passion in children again. But at the same time, in the face of pandemic, where the life and especially education for children has been completely eclipsed by, digitization and all that, I am trying to somewhere bring back the children for print books reading, because I strongly believe that's a altogether different experience. And like you were talking about the power of picture, the power of picture, there's power in fiction as well. So what do you think about power of print books versus digital books? And do you think it is more impactful and it's more important to introduce children or introduce the reading habit through print books, and it leaves a bigger impact on them?
Well, I think that libraries are the most wonderful places in the world. I mean, they are just, they're full of stories, and they open gates for children. And what I think is really important is that children get the time to find these books, what books they really like, not just be handed books that we grown-ups think they should read. They have to be able to explore. They have to have the time and maybe guidance to see all the different kind of books. And also through creation, I find it is a really strong method to have children come into libraries and start illustrating and writing stories themselves, because they get so involved and they look at the books in a different manner when they start making their own stories. So, you know, libraries are so creative places. Just bring the kids in and give them time. I think we are limiting the time that children have to read for pleasure. And I think that reading for pleasure is so important.
Sorry, can I add something here? You know, specific to what you said about digital books versus print books. I mean, I would consider myself a digital migrant and my daughter a digital native. So for someone like me, I like to feel a piece. Look at me. I mean, I've printed out questions. I really don't need to do that anymore. But I just like the feel of paper, right? And maybe kids today, they don't feel it. They don't need it. Maybe it's a different paradigm for them.
I feel that the book is a very special item. I love the paper. I love the feel of a book in my hands. And I'm going to show you this lady here. She's a witch. Her name is Gullveig, just for your own health, because if I don't mention her, she will come at you later on. So this is Gullveig.
Everyone, please take note at once. Okay.
So this is a famous witch from the poem Völuspá. But I have to put this down to show you. But if you open books with illustrations, it's completely different than if you just, you know, have, for example, the audio text of a book. It's a completely different experience because we're using another part of the brain when we're looking at pictures than when we're reading the text. So we're getting much more involved, and the pictures, they show all kinds of things that are not in the text, but lie beneath the lines in regards to, for instance, emotions and so on. So I think that they get a much more enhanced experience by reading a book than a digital version of it. I really do. So I hope that all children have access to physical books. I hope that they get to lie on their stomach on the floor and read and look at the pictures and spend time imagining what it would be like to be somewhere else and be someone else, and be open to all possibilities, you know, use their imagination.
There's a young man who's had his hand up for a while in the first row, so we're gonna start.
Hello, thanks for the wonderful session. I am an avid reader of mythology, and now I know of a lot more books to read about thanks to this session. My question to you is that I have read some books on Norse mythology, for example, the Magnus Chase series by Rick Riordan, and in that series, you know, like you mentioned that your favorite character is Fenris Wolf, but Fenris Wolf in Magnus Chase has been portrayed as some wolf that is really evil, and all he wants to do is just destruct everything. In fact, there's a whole book about the protagonist Magnus Chase going and tying Fenris Wolf up. So I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion about this? Do you think that Fenris Wolf is really evil?
Well, he is portrayed.
Sorry, young man, would you like to moderate the rest of the session?
Yeah. Thank you for your wonderful question. He is portrayed in the old literature, he is portrayed as quite evil. And when Ragnarök is coming closer, he is loose, and he's kind of a symbol of where everything is loose and all boundaries have broken and so on. So he is definitely a sign of that. But when I wrote my book series about Wolf and Edda, I'm also questioning, there are always two sides to every story, and so many characters, they are depicted in one way, but what if we ask them? Maybe their story is a bit different. And Wolf, the boy in the story, he becomes a really good friend of the Fenris Wolf, and the Fenris Wolf tells him his story and how the gods were really unjust to him. And they become, Wolf, the boy, he calls the Fenris Wolf Fuffi, and they really bond, because both of them feel that they have been misrepresented. Wolf also feels that other people view him in a different way. He feels that they're not seeing who he is at the core of his heart, and so does the Fenris Wolf. So he gets to tell his story, and thank you for your wonderful question.
All right. There's a lady in a yellow shirt. She's raised her hand quite.
Greetings to this team. So as we all are discussing the linguistic sphere, so I'm more interested into the philosophy and all that stuff. As you said, there is a child within ourselves, but there is also a toxic inner self within us. So how to awaken the child within us? Because in today's world, people are more busy in their own stuff and own life, and they are not focusing on their inner self. So can you enlighten that?
Yes. In working in the area of children's culture, this is a really important factor, is to stay with the child within. So I really spent time trying to dwell there, taking walks, trying to see things with the wonder that children do. And yesterday I had this wonderful drive here through old Jaipur, and I was really experiencing this wonder, this feeling, the child within. I was there yesterday the whole day, and it was really marvelous. And this is something that I just try to maintain. I try to remember what it was like to be a child. I try to remember when were the vulnerable moments, how it is to feel like you're alone in the world, how it is to feel small and insignificant. And I try to dwell there. And also when I'm writing my books, the stories and so on, I really envision myself with the children in the critical moments of the book. I am there with them at the same place, and I am experiencing their fears and their pleasures, of course, also. So I try to also maintain the playful aspect, and this I do with my creative work. I try to remember how much fun it is just to play around, keep the critic somewhere else, be this, just experience curiosity and what it is to try to discover new things and play around and question things and turn them on their head like Alice in Wonderland does, and so on. So this is really what I try to do as often as possible. And I know that it can be quite difficult in stressful times and with all our adult work pressing on us. But this is very important, I think, in working in this area. I hope I answered your question.
All right, the gentleman here, and then the gentleman in the green.
Thank you, ma'am, for this session. I had a quick question on, so I come from a technology background. So when you talk about, I come from a school who, I like to read books, but with the advent of augmented reality or a virtual reality world in the future decades, let's say, do you think medium to distribute content will shift? Would you also do it? And is it a good or a bad or an inevitable change?
We should, of course, embrace technology and everything that it has to offer. There are, of course, if children, for instance, are really immersed in technology, we should go all in with our storytelling, with the images, with the playful aspects of technology, the possibility of choice and so on. So I think that these things can work very well together, but I would never want to see the physical book kind of disappear in regards to this. But I love new technology and storytelling possibilities within the new technology. It's just, these are worlds of wonder. And children are really involved in them, but we should take care that they are not just involved in worlds of violence, for instance, and so on. And also these stereotypical worlds that tend to be where women, for instance, are portrayed in a manner which is not acceptable today. So I think that we should just be critical of what we're doing, but also look at all the creative aspects of it.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for your session. Thanks for sharing your work. So I work in female education, specifically between the ages of 5 to 12. And you mentioned female empowerment, and that's a huge part of your writing process. But in the landscape, I haven't really seen that as much as I would like to, especially when you're dealing with little girls. What do you think is the evolution of female empowerment?
Could you say,
sorry, could you speak up a little?
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say,
yeah.
Is that better? Yeah, so I work with the girls between the age of 5 and 12 in education. And I haven't seen enough female empowerment in the literature they read. So I just wanted to get your perspective on that. Do you see it as something that's evolving, especially from like 20 years ago? So.
Sorry. I think it is evolving. I am seeing it both in books and in movies and so on, but I am most definite to play my part in that. So in everything that I do, I try to use the opportunity of putting female characters in the forefront and putting various types of female characters, not just the stereotypical ones. And also, I mean, in my witch's tale, I have really a wide variety of different kinds of witches and so on. But I think that I can see that there are more and more artists that are working with this goal. Just if you look at, for instance, the Marvel movies and so on, I think that I can see a shift there in how they're working, but I would like to see it move much faster. I think this is a really slow progress that needs to be enhanced.
I think we have time for one more quick question. Gentleman over there, and then we can, sorry.
Hello. Could you just take us how you structure your work? Do you like, since you are a writer and an illustrator, do you like write first, illustrate later, or how does this thing work?
I often start out with an image, with ideas of images. So I really think in a picture kind of way, and so I visualize everything that I write and see it in my head before I write it, and I also see it in my head before I illustrate it. So I often have these core images that I start out with, but then I tend to write and illustrate then afterwards. But I draw portraits of all my characters. And that I do while I'm creating the characters. And I find that the children really like this, because when I put these portraits in the books, I can keep the pace of the stories faster. So they have these images of the characters as soon as they come into the story, and I can keep the story moving. So these drawings I'm drawing throughout the work process, but very often it's the image that ignites the idea, and then I work it kind of in a circle. So thank you.
Thank you. You've opened up a whole new world for us. We all have so many more questions for you, but I have finished the session exactly on time. So I'm going to get a high five from that for that. But thank you. This has been fabulous. We really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank Kristín Ragna Gunnarsdóttir and Shivani Sibal for that enlightening conversation, taking us back to our childhood. We thank the Embassy of Iceland for their support, and especially the Ambassador of Iceland to India, Mr. Gudni Bragason. And we urge you to pick up this pamphlet that's right outside about our author's works and find out more about our author today. Thank you, and we hope to see you at future sessions of the 15th Jaipur Literature Festival.
Thank you. Thank you. You know,